Hello and welcome to today's series of conversations. And today I am speaking to the delightful Emma Last. Hello, Emma.
Hi, Sarah. I'm so glad to be here.
Good, lovely. Well, as always, we're going to talk about you and your life and the stuff that you've done that brought you to coaching and the stuff that you've done since you left your full-time employment and became a full-time coach and running your own business. And also, special treat, we're going to talk about your chapter in the book that you and I are both co-authors in that was put together by Jess Prime. So let's start by saying, Emma, you finished school. What did you want to be when you finished school?
A number of different things. A solicitor at one point, a dentist. I didn't necessarily really want to go into business. And that was because I came from an entrepreneurial family and I'd seen the ups and downs. I wanted more of a profession.
Stable.
Is what I had in my head at that time.
Right, okay. And so what did you end up doing?
So I ended up doing a degree in pharmacology. So it's all about drugs and how they interact with your body. And I loved that degree. And what I wanted to do was potentially then go on to the marketing side of the kind of the drugs industry, if that makes sense. But to get into it, you had two paths that you could go down, and the paths were either you went and were a medical rep, or you went into a lab. Well, that was just like sticking pins in my eyes for me. I needed kind of interaction, and when I thought about becoming a medical rep, I thought at the age of 21, I don't want to be sat in a car on my own. I want to work within a team of people. And so I just applied for loads of graduate programs. And then I ended up getting a graduate program with a big blue chip organization, HR services provider. And then I actually ended up there for 19 years. So I started as a graduate with them and worked my way up and ended up as a senior leader within the business. I was a senior leader probably for the last sort of 8-10 years.
So you're working in HR for them?
Yeah, well, so it's a HR services business. So we would work with clients. So it's like they've got, recruitment parts and all sorts of different sectors. A lot of the work that I did was on transition. So if we bought different businesses, I would work on transformation, like business transformation, integration of businesses together. There was a lot of coaching involved, a lot of project management, a lot of change management involved. And part of my role, once it was all embedded, was actually to get people performing to their best. So a lot of the work that I did was very much from a coaching and mentoring perspective. Okay. Yeah, so it was great. I had something like 13 different jobs in 19 years, and absolutely loved it, and loved everything about it. But I also had 3 children while I was there, twins, and then a surprise baby who's now 12, nearly 12 next week. And in my mind, I was very much a career girl, very committed, high achiever. It was like, what's next? Never really paused. Never really took proper lunch breaks. Never really looked after myself. But, I was a high performer. I was really good at what I did. So I was invincible, wasn't I? And that really was. And it was like every time there was a restructure, it was okay, I'll be all right, because, I'm a high performer. I'll get through it. And always thought and always used to have in my mind, the key thing was it didn't matter what things we had to go through as a business, as long as our values were the same. And this is a lot that I would talk to my teams about, because I managed up to, 30, 40 people. And, we often, I would, they would say, oh, it's so tough at the moment, or the market's really difficult, or this is, I'm struggling with this or whatever. And, I would often bring it back to their why, the whole purpose, how it connected with the organization and their values. And I'd often bring it back to that. And it was, in the end, it was values that drove my decision to leave. So
I was going to say, so now I've got to know how that works.
It was just the final restructure. I ended up with a promotion, but it just didn't sit right how that because I'd worked in business transformation myself for so long, and on various different projects, I'd seen what good looked like, and to me, the balance of importance of people tipped the other way. And we were a people business.
Okay, so you were leaving your corporate job. You've been promoted. It wasn't as people orientated as you wanted it to be.
Yeah, and I just felt, even though I'd been kind of promoted into that role, I felt quite numb, and I didn't understand why. And I think because the stress had kind of been building over a period of time, I think I'd actually got to a point where I was quite burnt out. And I didn't know the signs of what burnout was, and neither did my employer, or at least they didn't. They thought, what's going on with her, rather than actually, why is she not happy about being in this job? And I was just thinking I couldn't trust them. And I was quite cynical, and those I was just, highly in a prolonged stress situation, really. And, it was probably years worth of of working in a culture where potentially there wasn't as healthy boundaries as there could have been.
Okay, so you walked.
Yes. Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to take redundancy, because after that restructure, I had told them a few months in that I was not quite so happy. And so they kind of extended my trial period in that job. So I did leave with some redundancy, which was gave me a starting point. And my immediate reaction when I left was, right, I'll just go and find another job that's just the same. And I kept going for these interviews, and I was like, why do I feel not excited about this? What is going on? It's really not like me. I'm such a passionate person. It's like, what is going on? And then I thought, you know what? Within a couple of weeks, I found it difficult to get up in the morning. So I was a person that bounced out of bed at like 6 a.m. and, was like on the road, and, I'd left before 7:15 every morning, pretty much, apart from, a day or 2 days when I dropped the kids off at school, before school club. So everything was like precision planning in our house. But as soon as I stopped, I was exhausted.
You stopped.
Yeah, I stopped. And so it was almost like a forced pause at that point. But that's a massive thing about what I teach now. That's why I teach, I've got the human reboot. So that's what I teach now, is trying to teach people that are, high achievers, either in the corporate environment or as entrepreneurs, to create those healthy boundaries, and also to be able to learn to pause, because it's something that doesn't come easy to a lot of people, especially when you're really passionate about something and connected to a purpose. So so I had to kind of reevaluate everything. And it was for the first time in my life, I thought, since having the children and since starting my career, that it was like, actually, do you know what? You're going to have to come first for a bit to really work out what it is. And I'd always been like kind of really aware of how I needed to behave, or what I needed to do to be successful in business, and how to help others perform at their best. But the actual self-awareness piece of actually being aware of my own needs, it had just been so far down the pecking order, that I talk about self-awareness being one of the key learns of my life, you know, and that's a difference between, you know, it's the starting point for a lot of things and a lot of change.
Absolutely. People are not self-aware. We're not, are we? As human beings, especially women, I think, we don't think of us, we don't do that thing that you do on airplanes where you put your own mask on before you help anybody else, and that idea that you can't pour from an empty cup and all of those sort of analogies. We hear them and we go, yes, 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 and we think, providing we throw the odd early night in, that we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And of course we're not.
No. And I think when you're talking about, like, because I talk a lot about putting your oxygen mask on first. And that was just something that I never did. It was just like, no, I'm tough enough. And people used to also like talk about, oh, she's really resilient, her. Oh, that's broken. Let's just stick her on that. She'll sort it out. Because that's what I did. I just went on. I went from that to the next, to the next, to the next. And it was like, this is, and I remember my husband saying to me, you know, when that, because I used to get like, you know, new car every few years, and I you know, and I had an Evoque sat on the drive, and I remember him saying to me, when that car goes back, you're going to be devastated because you love that car. And actually, I wasn't, because those 3 months I'd really focused on me, and I'd started to kind of work out what was important to me. And for me, it was like, when I started to work out what all the strands of, like, because people used to talk about work-life balance, but it's a big load of bobbins, because it's an overall life balance. And actually, what else fits within that life? Because, you know, you've got parents. What's the woman that you know, how are you as a wife? How are you as a mother? How are you as, you know, a daughter? You know, sister, friend. You know, you've got the financial elements, your physical well-being, your mental well-being. There's just so many elements, you know. And I remember kind of doing, you know, doing the Wheel of Life, and then thinking, well, some of this is like, makes sense. That, well, those headers are a bit bobbins, you know. Like that doesn't, you know, I don't connect with that. So yeah, so that's something.
Life is what you. I've heard people, I've shown them a Wheel of Life and they've gone, oh, well, that's not relevant to me.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are some things in that Wheel of Life that are less important, because it's when it's based on your, like, values. So I do something similar to the Wheel of Life, but more of a jigsaw. So looking at how your pieces fit together, and there's some different elements in that. But it's not easy being it's not easy being an entrepreneur or a career woman, and you know, I think as we were, you know, the age that we live in and are kind of have been brought up in now, it's like, oh, you know, well, women can have it all, you know, women can have a job, you can have a career, you can have the children, you can have it all, you can have it all. And actually, there's no reason why you can't have it all, but you do need to know where your priorities are.
One of our mentors has a saying which I think is very relevant, which is, you can have it all, but you can't do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you look at boundaries for people and you help them look at their own boundaries. What about your boundaries?
Good question. So I evaluate my boundaries quite often. Something that I work a lot on is, so I use the tools I use with my clients, and I evaluate where I'm at and look at actually where do I want to be each week when I'm planning what I'm going to be doing, my objectives for those weeks. There is generally always a well-being or personal development, self-development goal in there, because that, for me, when you're looking at your well-being, you know, yes, there's exercise, there's connection, there's, you know, mindfulness. So there's giving, there's so much basically within that, and it's working out sometimes when you're not doing enough of that, or when you are, you know, where you can be doing more. And I think it's certainly in the pandemic, when 90% of my business was offline before the pandemic, so I had to shift it pretty much, because I do a lot of training with organizations and training with individuals as well. So that was a huge shift. So it was, I had a lot of work to do. My husband is an artist, but he also works in retail. So they didn't, he wasn't furloughed because he was massively needed. He worked more hours than he normally did due to the role that he did. So it's like I was at home homeschooling, or supporting homeschooling of 3 children, and trying to transition my business as well at the same time. So it definitely wasn't easy. And at some points, yes, I probably questioned some of my boundaries, if that makes sense. You know, like, and sometimes when you're a coach, that's challenging, isn't it? Because, for example, on a Tuesday night, I have a coaching group. So, you know, that we can be on till 9, 9:30 sometimes on a Tuesday night. And then if I'm delivering training on a Wednesday, so it's just, I have to kind of look at my overall amount I'm doing in a week, and look at when I pause and when I stop. But what I do is I always, on my podcast, I talk about how do you switch off so you can switch on and perform at your best. And so for me, every day without fail, I will walk. I go for a walk twice a day, even if it's 10-15 minutes, because that just takes me away from my desk. And luckily, I also have a little dog as well, that sometimes if I get too absorbed in things, or my children, you know, they'll come and say, you know, come on. And I'll be, it's like, oh, yes. Because when you're committed to it, but also it's communicating that to your family to know, actually, yes, I can. You know, I've just taken 4 days off this weekend, you know, and taken my daughter away for the weekend. So it's about building regular things into your things into your day, and creating healthy habits, but also actually planning in time to have a break as well. And also, like, basic things that I do, that if I find that there's something that causes me kind of stress or anxiety, and I often do this with my clients, is I'll say to them, can you eliminate it, minimize it, or manage it? And it's just asking yourself that question, and it's really like a basic, it's just, you know, can you eliminate it, minimize, or manage it? So my work emails, I only have on my laptop, don't have them on my phone, because that helps me. If I was looking at those at night, then that would mean I wouldn't switch off. So it's sometimes being clear with yourself on your own boundaries to support, you know, some of the things. We're not perfect, and this is really an interesting conversation when you talk about that with, you know, other coaches, because often people think, well, you're a coach, you know, you're you know, an expert.
You must have shit together if you're a coach.
You must do everything perfectly. No, I don't do everything perfectly, you know, and I say that to my client, I don't. The key thing is self-awareness, and knowing that you are always on a self-development journey.
So I know from a conversation that we had before we went live that part of your managing yourself is journaling.
Yes.
So you and I contributed a chapter each to Jess Prime's book, My 2020, about how we were affected by the pandemic.
Yeah.
And your chapter was done slightly differently than everybody else's. Do you want to tell us how that worked?
Yeah. So when we were asked to contribute, I was like, what am I going to write about? And what am I going to do? And I thought, oh, well, I've got so many good things that I've wrote about last year, because I wrote nearly every day. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to pull all my journals together and see what I wrote. And there's such a kind of eclectic mix. You know, there's conversations at the beginning where I was quite worried, and one of my friends was a lady I'd trained. She was based out in China, so I was kind of saying, before we were doing anything in the UK, it's like, we need to be doing something now. Why are we not doing something? So it was all those questions, or, you know, I'm quite scared, you know. Then when it was courses, you know, were cancelled face to face, things like that, you know, those sorts of emotions around that. Then there was, you know, I wrote letters. There's a letter in there to my children. It's just really whatever's in my head. There's some gratitude stuff in there, but it's just how I journal. And some of it is like, you know, it'll be like, oh, I've seen a quote, and then I journal more around that quote. But what was really interesting was that when I pulled it all together, we were asked to write around 3,000 words, and I hadn't realised how much I'd written last year. But I'd written, when I pulled it all together, I'd written 15,000 words. And I was like, oh, well, which bit should we include then? So it was trying to then pull the bits out to make it smaller and digestible for a chapter. So
your contribution was really the act of you processing what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the things, you know, around shifting my business online, things I was doing with the kids, you know, things that little memories that happened in the day and things like that. I remember, I don't know why I keep remembering this part, but I remember someone put a post on about odd socks. So there's always there's always a use for your odd socks. So this was around the time when we were all running out of toilet paper, and it really kind of made me think. It made me think about it. It just really made me think, because it was just like, well, you're right. I've got two boys. I've got loads of odd socks, because I was so stressed out about all these people that were going and, you know, filling the houses with pasta and tin tomatoes and bread and whatever they were, flour or whatever they could get their hands on. Yeah, whatever they could get their hands on. And I understood that, and I talked to people a lot about that, and, you know, getting them to, because people were just like, how selfish are those people? But it's just your basic psychological need is to be able to, you know, it was one of the first things on Maslow's hierarchy of need. That's what people were doing. It was just like, this is all going wrong. We just need to make sure that we're safe, and, you know, we've got enough food to keep us going. It's a basic need, food and water. There we go. Just slightly more than food and water. But yeah, so that whole thing around the socks, it really kind of, it stuck out to me, and I just thought, actually, there's always a solution. Because right in the early days, it hit me, I think, because I had the friend that was in China. The week we had the first announcement, which was on the Monday night, that's when it hit me most. And I'm a governor of a school, went into the school and was really worried about teachers and everything like that, and the kids in school and school shutting. And so it was just that whole thing. I remember literally crying snotty tears all the way, you know, home on that Tuesday morning, cancelling, losing about £10,000 of business within a day. It was, you know, and so it was a lot to get kind of your head around. But actually from that, although I had that kind of my meltdown very early, if that makes sense, I got my solutions head on quite quickly. And I actually could see other people not getting their solutions head on, which for me was more like, I felt like it was like, okay, I think we're in mentoring mode now. It was just like, right, these are the steps that you need to take. Because it was just literally, people were just in blind panic, and so it was like, or these potentially are your options that you could do. What about this? What about that? So it was, almost that support mechanism changed in that period of time. And then quite quickly, people found their feet and found their groove.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how about you? We're very near the 30-minute mark. So when you look back on the pandemic, and I appreciate that it's been a terrible experience for a lot of people. Obviously, there are an awful lot of people that have died, and people have lost their nearest and dearest, etc. But overall, for you, was it what kind of an experience was it?
I think it just gave me more. It gave me more time to be able to pause and refocus the direction that I was going in. It's made me think about. I mean, when I stepped back from working in corporate, my priority was to not be away from the family as much. So I wasn't away as much, but I might be away, say, I don't know, 4 nights a month. Whereas now that's changed. I'm not away as much because everything's pretty much delivered, online. I've delivered 3 face-to-face courses since, no, 4 face-to-face courses since. So there's that balance is much better. I think it's made me really think about who me as, an advocate in my market, if that makes sense. And in terms of being somebody that, and a lot about my brand. So, I've been involved in writing 2 mental health and wellbeing courses that have been accredited by the first aid industry body, one for adults and one for teachers that to support children in schools. Obviously contributed to the book with Jess as well. So that my program I then created. So my coaching was always one-to-one up until I'd had it in my head from November 2019, sort of October, November, that I wanted to create my Human Reboot program. But I hadn't done it. And then it gave me the opportunity to really sit there and kind of work out what I wanted within that program. So, that is, it's a group, it's a mentoring program really, because each week they come and we have a topic and we cover that topic. Yes, they're coached around that topic, but but it's delivering, it's equipping them with the skills and tools to become more resilient and really to prevent them from burning out. So, and this year as well, I've launched my podcast, which was in May. So I don't think I probably would have done as much of the add-on bits, if that makes sense.
We'd all carried on doing the same old, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
It was like a reboot.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I look back and I think, would I have loved, I would have loved the opportunity in some ways because, some families, both people got furloughed, didn't they? And they were like doing the gardens and all the rest of it. With both of us, that just wasn't an option. And also I wanted to be able to support people. And throughout the pandemic, I gave, I think I was giving a minimum of 4 hours a week away for free to support NHS workers. So giving back is something that's important to me on my mission.
We've been talking for 32 minutes, Emma.
Gosh.
I did say it goes quickly, doesn't it? didn't I? And thank you so much for your time. And let's both wish Jess all the best with her book. And good luck with your human reboot and the other stuff, your podcast and all the stuff that you're getting busy with.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah.